Well, considering it looks like we've got a lot of shy people, I'm gonna go ahead and get the ball rolling, whether it's appropriate or not. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Brent Roars, Chief Supply Chain Officer with Stoughton Trailers out of Stoughton, Wisconsin. First and foremost, thank you very much for putting this on. Purpose for me kind of joining here and kind of attending is we're currently using Sightline MRP. We tried to launch with APS about 10 years ago, and from my understanding, it did not go well. And so I think the question I have and what I'm trying to find out here, I believe that APS is the right solution. What are the steps? What are the things that I need to be aware of other than just becoming more familiar with how APS works? So either everybody's digesting the question, they're like, boy, that's a really stupid question.
So one of the things, at least an issue we ran into is APS. My understanding is APS operates in infinite mode while scheduling operates in finite mode. So that's one of the hurdles I face as a scheduler is dealing with planning being infinite and scheduling being finite. So the plan doesn't always, depending on what kind of constraints you're facing in your shop, doesn't always reflect when you're supposed to have materials and things like that.
Helpful, thank you.
This is Mike Juergens. Could you go over how you get your inputs? Are you running off forecasts or orders or things like that? How does your long-term plan develop? Because that makes a huge difference how you set it up.
Yeah, we're a build to order. Coupled with we try to do some level of forecasting, but it's very fluid, and we're basically just reserving spots and then trying to forecast what the demand might be. But it's a build to order scenario to where we're loading in orders that are booked from the customer.
Is the lead time for your components longer than your orders to the customer?
Considerably. We're currently anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks from an order from a customer, and lead times generate anywhere between 12 to 22 weeks for materials.
You plan on setting up any safety stocks on components?
Right now, we're trying to use more of a supply base that would be holding some level of finished goods inventory, a stocking agreement, as opposed to trying to keep material here that we may or may not use.
So I'm perfectly okay if anybody wants to correct me, but the system would like to push back the customer orders if you don't have the materials available.
Kind of like a clear to build.
Yep.
And that's an APS.
Yes.
So if we don't have the materials available, it won't allow us to schedule it, or it won't allow us to produce.
There are settings where you can say, hey, move this stuff up. But if you don't say that you can expedite your items, then it tries to push your customer order back until those items are available.
Okay.
And I said, and I'm perfectly okay anybody correcting me.
And
You're right.
to add on,
Just so you.
yeah, to add on to that, I believe it will also push other material out to align it to the furthest material. So like say you have multiple, I don't know if you are just like single stock build, like machining type stuff, or if you're like assembly, but
Assembler. So these are like the
Yeah.
semi-trailer that you see rolling down the road, the big white boxes. That's what we build.
yeah, so whatever your critical delay is, it will try to align other POs for material to make that build when you put your order in.
Whatever the longest lead time is.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
which is a consistent concern. So when you pull in your critical delay, you'll find a new critical delay. Then you try to pull that in, find a new one until it finally aligns.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we have been able to get around it by putting in some future POs. So if we
Like
have
planned orders?
yeah, planned, not customer orders, but like when supplier orders.
Stock orders. We call it like stock plan orders.
Yeah. So from that, your 22-week lead time, the system sees that you have a PO coming in early.
Yep.
And then it plans according to that
Yeah, so that's
supply
what we've
them.
done. We've kind of manipulated the system a little bit with our long lead items to where if we think we're going to get an order, we'll put a planned order out there that would exceed past what we think we're actually going to get an order from a customer, which would then generate the demand. The risk is that sometimes we ended up bringing in the materials, even though we never got the order, so we never cancel out the planned order. Okay. I told you I was going to get the ball rolling, so I apologize if I'm monopolizing the conversation. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to go ahead and chime in. It's that awkward silence, right?
So I have one to kind of build on yours.
Please.
So we're in a engineer to order environment, and it can take as much as a year to of production for these items that we're producing. So we're going to produce it, have a FAT, and then ship it to the client and install it at their site. And then in addition to that, we have long lead time items that could make the whole project somewhere in the order of 2 years. What that means is that we have the same product on, or we have different products in the floor running through the same work center and same operations at the same time. And what we're encountering with scheduling on Sightline is that scheduling wants us to finish that operation before we put or finish in that work center before we put something else in that work center, which makes sense on an assembly line. But here I want to be able to work multiple jobs part-time. So I might have my guys working 10 hours a week on one job, 10 hours on another, and 20 on a third. Have any of you encountered something like that where you want to run parallel jobs through the same work center at the same time and schedule that?
I believe you would want to adjust your resources then, because it should accommodate, like, I don't know, well, are you infinite or finite?
We're infinite. But scheduling is finite. Right.
I believe you can run infinite for both. I could be wrong on that. But it depends on what your resources are in the work center or the work group. If you apply more resources, it'll see that you can do more things concurrently in the cell, and will account for that. But infinite, it shouldn't restrain you, I don't believe.
Do you use labor resource groups and machine resource groups in those work centers?
To be honest, we're just setting it up, but the answer is it's labor resource groups primarily. There's a couple of operations with machine, but most of what we're dealing with is labor.
So if you're running infinite and your operations require one labor resource, you can, like he was suggesting, if you put more labor resources there, it gives the system the illusion that you can run multiple jobs, but you're going to get a false impression of your throughput because you're not really going to be running them simultaneously unless you turn down your efficiency at the work center.
Okay. You've given me some ideas for levers there.
Can you explain that efficiency again?
Careful with efficiency. It messes with your accounts.
Yeah, that's a new term I just heard. Can you explain that?
As somebody else, I have to explain that. Don't have enough expertise.
So I think he's referring to labor efficiency. So you can set,
were you
because
asking me?
nobody
Sorry.
really is 100% efficient. So, like, because people go to the bathroom, people do whatever for labor and stuff. So you set your efficiency to how efficient you assume your labor is going to be, and so you'll say a job takes an hour to do. If you're at 80% efficiency, it gives you a run duration, I believe, like whatever the 1.2 or something hours it'll take you to do. But yeah.
Okay, now I see how that factors into the number of resources. Thanks.
if you guys ever do mess with efficiency, though, you need to be aware that if your costing method, for example, is standard and standard, that will create variances in the general ledger. Because like you said, if it took an hour and our standard costing was an hour and we transacted at 1.2 hours, for example, then there will be 1 hour posting to the costs of inventory with a 20%, with a 0.2 hour going to the labor variance accounts. So, and of course, it does mess with your scheduling. It's an extra additional layer when you're running APS and scheduling, because APS, I don't believe, looks at that. The scheduling does. Is that right? Can somebody else say that?
So the efficiency at the work center only applies to scheduling, not, I don't believe it planning.
Okay, yeah. So that's the extra thing too. If you're used to monitoring your projected lates in the plan, keeping inside your liquid zone, keeping your liquid zone really good before you hand it off before you pour concrete with the scheduler and everything, planning will not see that you need more utilization time in that when it hands to the scheduler. And we actually say that because we actually run opposite. So we are finite in our planning on certain bottlenecking work centers, but we actually run scheduling infinite so that when we hand that off, we do not constrain new plans coming in. So all of it is a give and take. I'm just going to say that. But those types of, you got to just remember that those costing and those types of things do hit the general ledger. So if you want your CFO, unless you want your CFO to come over and have some good conversations with you,
But if you're running a standard cost, you'd expect to see a variance pop out somewhere. How do you compare to standard? So you'd expect to see a variance someplace, correct?
you are exactly right. And so it absolutely has its time and place. Sometimes where that affects people is, well, I'm actually clocking my time back into sideline. And so you don't necessarily, so you can plan your, if reducing the scheduling hours, or excuse me, reducing the efficiency to have scheduling schedule more hours in that, if that's useful from that whole just planning and scheduling standpoint, you could also then, if I'm clocking my hours back to the system, I'll have another variance that will hit somewhere in there because it took me 1.1 hours type of thing. So it really depends on how you follow your transactions through and where those are at. So if you post your times back to from a clocking part, then obviously the 1.1 will take over that 1.2 planned. If you're backflushing that stuff and not posting time transactions like that, or posting a labor hour transaction, then you're looking at playing with variances at that point. So, but in the end, it all comes out in the balance sheet. So.
I don't know if this applies to anyone, but one of the cheats we found, we call it a cheat or a workaround, in our items to get planning to be more in line with our scheduling is to make an item an MPS item and then set the lead time. So it's not really acting infinite. We're just manually managing how long it takes for an item to be done. MRP item, I'm sorry.
Infinite is for purchasing items, right?
Could you say that again?
The infinite options on the item master is applicable for the purchasing items. There are two options, infinite and as well as MRP. MRP is applicable for the manufacturing items. So it will look into the lead time defined in the item master. Okay.
Correct.
Infinite is for the purchasing items. It will think that we can get the item whenever you want. It will not look into the lead times.
Oh, right. So what we're doing is we're doing it to the parent. We're doing it to the parent item, which drives all planning underneath of it.
Okay.
So it sounds like you're not really using APS.
You are correct.
Okay. So you get a few of the extra forms, from a demand detail and perspective, but not the actual computations.
Yeah, we're
that
on a
it's
slow
doing.
road to going full APS. We've been trying for a while. We're not there yet.
Sure.
We're in a similar situation. Has anyone know how, if you're while you're working through that biggest bottleneck, how to identify other planned orders that may be scheduled out to align with that and know that they're impacted without accidentally ordering them and scheduling it with that bottleneck that you may be pulling in?
Could you repeat that?
With basically the issue that we may be ordering and aligning orders with a delayed demand that we're working on pulling in. So looking for a way to know when those other orders are delayed, the planned orders.
So one thing we did, it only works in some areas. So we have a lot of big build assemblies for like massive compressors, and we build them on projects. And so when we have certain long lead items that are a continual constraint, what we've done is remove them from the job or zero them out on the job bombs and put them as a project resource, which then doesn't constrain the other parts on the job. It will still push those jobs to the rest of it will ignore that part, basically, that is your constraint, and bring everything else into the actual need for the job end date, or that project resource that the job is tied to. And then once you get that constraint part in, you can then increase the job bomb back to its original amount, zero out the resource, and then that'll help you pull things into the actual date as opposed to aligning everything to that last delay. But you have to have a project to do that. As far as I know, I'm not sure how you would do it otherwise, other than just having it removed from the job bomb.
Yeah, we've experimented with some expedited lead times as well, to get rid of that delay until it's resolved.
One other option, if it's kind of on an order by order basis, right? If you're using demand summary APS and you look at the demand detail from the demand summary APS, so if you hit that blue button at the top, it will tell you all of your other supplies and demands and how much slack they have, which is basically telling you how many days earlier you could kind of supply them if it wasn't delaying them for other issues, right? So that's kind of a way on an order by order basis that you can kind of try to pinpoint some areas where you have slack in the plan that the system could bring it in earlier if you wanted it to.
This is Manju here. I'd just like to add one more point on the spot. There is one more option, other than the demand summary and demand details. We have a form called delay details, which can show based on each demand what is the delay and how much delay it can be. What is the delay is because of the material or the resource. That is one of the things user can understand why the delay is. If at all you want to still drill down, if it is a delay from an item, then we have something called item bottleneck form, where you can see which demand is causing delay because of the item. Or if it is something based on the resource, we have resource group bottleneck form, which will get you know that which demand is getting delayed because of the resource constraint. So based on the checkbox on the demand summary APS form, you can distinguish whether the delay is because of the material or a resource. Then appropriate actions can be taken by looking at that particular respective forms. So that is one of the way to deal with the delay in any of the item or a resource. Does it make sense?
Are you?
Scott? Yeah.
Are you able to use that with to find multiple? Because we have the delay detail, but it shows us only the critical delay, the single one, and then so like we get that pulled in, and then we continually it's like, oh well, now this is a critical delay, and then we have to pull that in.
Yeah, on the particular form, all the bottleneck items will be displayed. If at all it is on the critical path, there is a checkbox which identifies that this particular bottleneck is on the critical path as well, so that you can see both.
Yeah, if you uncheck that critical box, you could filter uncheck
Oh,
the
give you
critical
everything.
box.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone found a way, because you can export that into Excel, but only for one specific the demand that you're on? Does anyone know of a way to export like pretty much all delay detail for multiple orders at once?
Not without wrapping that stored procedure into a SQL run and going through all your resource groups.
Gotcha.
Maju, forms that you mentioned, are they available for Sightline 9 Infinite APS? Or are
Yeah,
they
it
just
should be
specific to the
available.
latest?
No,
Mhm.
it is available for version 9 as well.
All right, thank you.
And Gov, if anyone has Gov. And Gov is usually a few updates behind, so I would imagine it'd be everything.
There were some questions in the chat from Scott about some ERs. I'd be interested to hear from Scott if he can share a little bit of background about these inquiries.
Yeah, those were developed by or submitted by John Brown back in 2023 or 2024, and they were prioritized in 24. And it looks like, according to Marin's message, number 1 and 2 are going to be coming this October. So that's really exciting news. So we'll have an option to put some safety time in there before material is expected to be here. Right now, based on supplier delays, we're kind of messed up if a supplier is late, and this will actually build in some allowances for those occasions. So those are really exciting enhancements.
Does anybody have any experience on the material planner workbench where sometimes you click on a line item and component shortages and every single item shows that it's going to be short, even though they have plenty of stock, there's no safety stock issues. It looks like it just hasn't figured out where to grab the inventory from. Is there like a background program that's got to tie things together, or anybody else experience that?
So there's no safety stock. I'm assuming no like forecast or anything. And it's just not allocating it to anything?
Yeah, every single component shows a shortage for the exact amount of the order, even though there's nothing that would say that any of that stuff has any restraints. They're in pickable warehouses. There's no safety stock limits they're going to hit. There's no POs you're waiting for inside the time frame. It just looks like the order said, I am here, and doesn't know where to grab the information from for the items it needs to consume.
Do you have the warehouse set to main?
Yep.
And you have one warehouse?
This is made in the warehouse and the materials are in that warehouse. So we're single site, multi-warehouse. But all this stuff is in the warehouse in the quantities necessary to satisfy all demands for those items.
Are there other
references?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Are there any hard cross references to anything?
No.
Are there other demands that those parts might be allocated to?
Yeah, that would be my.
Not in the quantities that would affect anything in that time frame.
I'm going to ask a stupid question, but are you rerunning APS every night?
APS runs at noon and midnight.
Okay, so it runs twice a
Scheduling
day.
and APS. Yep.
Are these jobs, POs, or both?
These are planned jobs.
What is the time frame window for the APS to run? Like, do you have like far?
Yeah, it runs basically wide, it grabs everything, so.
No, the time frame, like where to start planning to how far it's going. This is like a setting in the APS itself.
The horizon days.
Yeah.
Planning horizon.
I think that's 60 days.
I would suggest you put in a ticket with Infor under APS, and Vanessa is one of the best consultant or one of the best people they have, and she would give you the appropriate answer rather quickly.
Yep. Michael, before that, is this particular issue is consistently, or is any pattern that you see this particular issue?
It doesn't happen often enough for me to find out if it's something that was put in, 3 days ago, or if it was, if something else moved some inventory around. So our planning horizon is currently set to 1460.
Okay. I'll just give a workaround. If at all it is fine, then it will be good. If not, we can raise a ticket. There is some form called, APS resync all. You can just execute once. If at all you get that particular problem, execute this particular thing, and then see if that is getting resolved. If at all, every time when you run this APS resync and it is getting resolved, set this as a background task every night kind of things, then it should be good. If at all is still persisting, then I think you can raise the ticket.
So APS resync all on the help thing says that everybody should really be out of the system. Is that necessary? Because we run 24/5.
Typically, it's advisable that nobody should be using the system. Maybe you can set it the time before you run the APS, just 1 minute before you can set as the busy task.
Okay. I said we run, so our APS takes about 2 minutes to run, but I said that APS resync all, I know it says get everybody out of the system first, so.
The other thing, Michael, I just throw out there is you can kind of spot check some of the parts on planning detail APS, not the planning detail form, but the APS version, because that will show you the order that the system is allocating all of the demands to a component, right? So just to make sure it's not pushing something in front of that line that's on your workbench, and the system thinks you're out of inventory by the time it reaches planning for that order line on your workbench.
Okay.
Also,
that was going to be my suggestion too.
Also, do you run all your rebalancing background tasks each day before APS runs? Okay.
Yep.
I know we've covered part of this earlier. I was wondering, does anyone, how do you deal with the difference between infinite APS and finite scheduling? Anyone out there who's in that current situation? Like, how do you deal with the fact that the planning doesn't, like for purchasing and things like that, materials and even job run times, since they all show up in infinite mode, if you were to use the workbenches and release the jobs in real time when it tells you, in our situation where we're only one deep in a lot of work centers, obviously we would not be able to meet the due date, even though planning thinks you can.
So Chris, planning can be run finitely as well, just so you know. There's some setup you have to do in the resources and resource groups and things. At least in cloud, I don't remember 100% on-prem if that's
we're on premises.
Exception messages priorities form.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, we just had a revelation.
Okay, so I'm not in the cloud. I'm on site, and I don't believe. I believe it's because we're on site. It's if we wanted to run finite planning, that's a whole separate module that we would have to purchase. I think it's I know
it's an extra license. It's an extra license.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
But just a license fee.
So I just saw in the chat, Krishna asked about forecast consuming available capacity ahead of customer orders. I would recommend looking at your planning priorities. You can drop forecast and safety stock below other demands.
So here, this is a question I have posted. See, in ATS order priorities, I have set customer on high priority, forecast as, I mean, okay. So when there are scenarios I faced, forecast is consuming the available supply of raw materials and also the labor capacity as well. I mean, I couldn't able to figure out what could be the reason, has anybody encountered this kind of any scenarios here? Forecast is consuming your available capacity as well as the supply, even though I reprioritize in my APS priority log.
I think it would have to be a case of where it thinks it can consume it, like, because my understanding is a hard demand should take the place of the forecast once it's entered. If it's going to conflict, then it should only be, if you have the priority set up, it should go to the customer. That sounds interesting that it's taking that.
Yeah.
I know there's windows for some of this, like safety stock and forecast and stuff. Like we have an issue sometimes with our far out orders saying we're going to be short when we have plenty of stock and it's just allocating the safety stock. But then once we get within that safety stock window, that then goes away, but it will continue to say it until you're within that window. I don't know if that might be something to do with it.
I have a question regarding a few sub-assemblies that we manufacture in-house. So we have a few stocked sub-assemblies that we manufacture in-house, and we make jobs against them, kind of like a Kanban plan. What I've been running into is I have a material on hand, like I have some stock already built. I have some jobs that are enough to fulfill all the demands that we see in planning detail for the material. But as soon as the supply and demand goes out of sync, like I have more demand now, all of my jobs are getting out of sync. So what the system is saying to me, like what you are supposed to produce right away on a job, push it out, and it's creating a new supply plan for immediate use or to be made into a job immediately. So for some reason, the system is not taking into account my on hands and whatever supply I have in coming weeks, and then making a plan for the later stage. But it's making a plan right away and moving all my jobs, like with exception messages asking me to move my jobs till the end or wherever my last demand is. The reasoning, like I raised this question with Infor, and the reasoning I got for that is the system plans for firm jobs first, like wherever these stock components are being used. The system is planning against firm jobs first, like your demand and supply are matching for firm, and then whatever is remaining is being allocated to release jobs. And if you have a deficit in release jobs, then you are not, then the system is creating a plan to fulfill that release jobs. Is there any setting that anyone knows about that I can make the system consume all of my inventory and supply for release jobs first and then plan for the firm jobs?
I believe that's the APS planning priorities, or because we have the opposite. It always goes to release before firm jobs, but then firm before plan. And we were told that's the proper way to set it up. I think that's in the planning priorities, along with like what we were talking about with forecasts and safety stock. Like you would need to order tier that differently, would be my assumption. I don't know for sure.
I know that there's a report that was put out by the lake companies called APS Made Easier, minimizing extra PLN jobs and job move out messages, like 2020, where it keeps creating new PLN jobs rather than trying to expedite your real jobs and changes. So now you've got purchasing looking at a planned job they need to order and the real job you need to order. And there was some steps that they were going through to try and minimize some of that. It's not perfect. It still does sometimes create earlier planned jobs, even though you have real jobs to satisfy all your demand. It says you can move out or cancel that your real job. It doesn't tell you to expedite your real job. It creates a new PLN job earlier.
Yes, that is what I'm facing.
Yep.
Also look at lead times as well with what you have scheduled. Because yeah, we did run into that where we want, now I get what you're saying. Basically what we were finding was the system was thinking it can create a new job and get it out faster than completing the job that already exists. And so it was giving us kill messages for the old jobs and then wanting to release something new. I wasn't the planner that fixed that issue with us, so I can't tell you how we got rid of that because I haven't seen it recently, but we did have that issue.
Part of that I think comes back to like what I was talking about earlier. It's if you set the lead time on the item, if it's a manufactured item or something like that, to a more reasonable time. Like we had the same thing happening. It's always trying to cancel our existing orders and do new ones because again, our planning is in infinite mode, and so it doesn't see any of our constraints, and we have a lot. So if you set the lead time on the manufactured item and set it to an MPS item, it'll think it takes longer to do that. You would have to, depending on the situation, you'd have to far out. MRP item, I'm sorry, I keep saying MPS, but you'd have to change it to an MRP and then set the lead time really long, and then it won't think that it can beat you. You know the reality, and your scheduling may be finite, but it's planning in infinite, so it thinks it can act even faster if the job started. I wish there was a way for it to see that an active job that's already would it be better than a plan, but
so there is, and maybe you guys have already seen this and have tested it, but the supply usage tolerance that you can turn on the planning parameters on the APS tab is kind of meant for that, right? Where it's saying, hey, your due date, let's say, is today for a demand, and you have a supply 2 days from now. If you had a supply usage tolerance of, let's say, 3 days, it would say, hey, I can use that job, that already existing job, and peg that already existing job to my demand instead of trying to create a new one. So I would play with that a little bit if you haven't already. But if you have, I'm not sure what else might be causing that level.
Can
of
you repeat
friction.
that one? Okay, what was it in planning parameters?
It's the supply usage tolerance. You need to make sure that it's turned on in the planning parameters. It's on the APS tab. I'll take a screenshot of it.
Yes.
Joseph, what is the recommended number for that one? What is the number of days we can put it into supply usage? Any recommendation? What should be the number of days?
It kind of depends on like your lead times to supply your parts, right? So it's kind of a company by company basis, I think. And you can set it by item too. There is a supply usage tolerance. I think it's on the planning tab of the items form. It might be on the additional planning tab. But it kind of depends on the item and on the company. So typically I wouldn't recommend more than like 5 days personally, but there probably are exceptions where you might extend that even further.
We're I'm sorry, jumping back in again with the supply usage. We're a specialty shop, so some of our stuff takes years to make. So our tolerance is open pretty big now. That is another way that we take care of that. But one of the things I wanted to point out is be careful if you're not familiar with it. If you're doing days, you have to put it in as a negative number. So if you put it in as a positive number, it reflects hours. But if you put negative, like if you put negative 60, that gives you 60 days.
Yep, he's right.
Sorry, this is Tyler. I also wanted to piggyback on what Christopher was saying. In the additional planning tab, we found useful, with supply usage tolerance. There's also a checkbox under the flags portion of that form called must use future POs before creating PLNs. Could be a customization, but definitely an option.
It is, I believe that's a real thing. I forget where that's flagged at exactly, but yeah, and that is usable. Just be careful with that, right? Because if you have a PO, let's say out 180 days from now, it will say, oh, I'm not going to try to create any other orders until after that PO 180 days from now comes in, right? So it's going to delay a lot of things. So just be very careful if you're going to turn that on.
I have one. So we get a lot of where the system won't use it will ignore stock for component shortages when there's a PO coming in before the system sees it needs it. It's not allocated to anything, like it's just open available stock, but there is another PO that we have coming in that can satisfy it. Is there any way to get the system to look at the stock first before that PO? Because it just sort of clogs up the component shortages when we're looking at them. It'll say it's short, but in reality, we have stock. It's just the PO is the last thing that comes in ahead of it. I don't know if anyone's encountered that.
I've encountered that issue. Don't have a solution.
Yeah, I'll say that's a pretty tough one to deal with, I think, Robert.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do on a call like this, right, without looking at your planning kind of directly.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a solution to that because I've seen, the same thing. It's just if there's going to be a PO coming in, even if you have stock to cover the shortages, report will still pull that PO and consider it a shortage. I've also on the component shortages report noticed sometimes that short quantity doesn't seem to sum up to the actual quantity that would be needed for the build it's short for. I don't know if people have noticed that either. Sometimes it seems to be higher sometimes. It's like you may only need 10, but it's going to say short quantity is 15.
The scenario where I've seen that, Henry, is if it's like in a subcomponent part, like a subassembly, and the like assembly part number above it has like a minimum order quantity or an order multiple or a day's supply that's larger than the actual demand for the final parent you're looking at. It'll actually tell you what you're short for the supply for the subassembly, right? I'm not sure if that's the scenario you're running into or if you even have subassemblies like that, but that's the most common spot I see that.
Got it. So you might only be needing to build 5, but the plan would be to build 10 based off a minimum or something.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take a look at that. Yeah, we do have subassemblies. Thank you.
There was a question in the chat from Kyle about an issue where a job operation was scheduled a day prior to the job start date. If anybody wants to contribute to that question, not sure if Kyle, that was an issue with your scheduler, or you can elaborate. Feel free to.
Yeah, it seems
talk.
that even with running, like changing the operation date to making sure nothing's frozen anywhere in the system, we still have some operations that just ignore the start date on the header when APS is running, and it'll just schedule the operation before the start date on the job header. Then if anyone else had that issue at all.
Is anyone, this is Richard Parks, is anyone manually going in and adjusting any of those dates of the job?
No. This is
Repeatedly.
just the APS engine randomly scheduling operation start dates before the planners actually plan to start the job.
Is the job released before the start date?
No.
Okay. I mean, that shouldn't affect it, but only thought I had.
So planning, when you have planning, like plan the operation dates, it doesn't really care about the start date. All it cares about is trying to meet the due date of the demand that job is created for. So if it thinks it needs to start that job earlier, it will adjust the start date on the first operation to be before the start date you have on the job. So it's
which is almost like the start date on the job header doesn't even matter. It doesn't do anything.
Are you talking about released jobs that are released with like routings and operations?
Yes, it happens on release jobs with routing and operations as well.
So the planner shouldn't be, I mean, unless you're just using planning and you're not using scheduling, the scheduler shouldn't start a job before the start date on the packet. Unless you're running, like, unless maybe you're running planning last, but once you run the scheduler, it should follow those rules.
That's what we were under the assumption of, but randomly, it's only a handful of jobs here and there, but it's enough to cause major issues. But yeah, it's just randomly happening, and it doesn't matter. Even if we would freeze that job, somehow the operation could still be scheduled before it. And
No,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna say like even like an op 20 could schedule before an op 10 somehow, and that's almost impossible in our world.
Oh, I've had that issue, and that's the IT guy calls it re-indexing. Something gets out of alignment, and the operations are out of order. I off the top of my head, I don't know what he re-indexes, but it's a re-indexing issue.
Yeah, that's less of an issue, but yeah, the other major issue is the job operation starting before the planner scheduled it. So like we schedule it, and then APS runs and puts a date like a day or two beforehand on the job operation.
Kyle, are you also reviewing exception messages with that job and with that item ID?
We are, and
it's not tripping anything?
No.
Interesting. Because scheduler is a forward planning algorithm. And so when you run scheduler first, it looks at today and open things, and then it runs forward. And it's whether, I wonder if there's anything about scheduler not feeding the output correctly to APS, because then APS picks up after that and plans the rest of the horizon.
There's a parameter.
Okay, well, Kyle, this is Manju here again.
Yeah.
I'd just like to bring on some point here. Maybe there can be two scenarios here. Some people can run the APS and then run the scheduling, or some companies run the scheduling and then the APS. So looking at the second possibility, if at all you have run your scheduling, so you have your job start date and end date and operation start date, end date. But eventually, if at all you are running your APS back, there is the algorithm which runs first with the pull planning to make sure that the dates are satisfied. For some reason, if the particular dates are not satisfied, it starts the push planning. So in the push planning, it starts from the current available day and see that it can meet that particular end date. Maybe during this particular iteration kind of things, there can be a start date of operation ahead compared to your job order header start date. That is only the reason I can think about it. Maybe you need to do some more investigation to see what other settings are. this can be one of the reason.
I just shared a screenshot. You may have used planning output for scheduling checked. If that's the case, it's using the planning data instead of the scheduling data.
Yeah, that's what I just posted in the chat was the verbiage for that.
Now I don't know about that because we have that checked and I've never run into that issue before of having an operation start before the job or go out of order. It's interesting.
If you're allowing your system to plan into the past, that will happen.
Maybe we have something else unchecked, and so it's a combination of checks. Yeah.
Do you know what your start offset date is? If your start offset date is, even if it's 1 day, the planner may be pushing it back that 1 day.
Our start offset 0.
Oh well, dead end.
Do you know the view APS planning log? If you look at that, you look at the wall clock start, which is about line 4 in that output, you might double check that that wall clock start is looking at today. Because if you want to plan, right, you need to plan in today's time. So at 12:01 or greater, and ideally prior to any shift starts that are available. But we have had things in the past that are weird because our SQL time server didn't match our wall clock start. And that's basically APS thought we were 2 days behind, not today. And that really jumbles a lot of the planning and scheduling when it looks like that. But that's a good way to just check what does APS think today's date and time is when it runs and runs forward.
Interesting. It's an hour behind.
That might do it.
Thank you. I'll have someone look into that knows more about what that does.
We actually script all of we are an on-site, multi-site APS finite on-prem. So we actually script we start our utilities at about 6 p.m., starting with the general ledgers and things like that. But we have to make sure that even though you can sequence those things and to run in correct orders, that we don't run scheduling and planning until after midnight. And that keeps everything succinct moving forward where projections are accurate along with due dates.
Correct. We have ours set up the same way. But all right, I'll have someone look into this. So thank you for that.
Can you guys repeat the form that you guys were just talking about?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat there.